Hello and welcome Nosferatu Clown to the chat. I am Petter and welcome to Malts and Meeples. So as I said in the chat, I have so many games on this table. It is ridiculous. If you could see this, I have basically 2/3 of the table covered in games that I want to try and get through tonight. But before that, I'm going to need a drink to help with that. And we're going to go with the orange Jameson. And cream soda combo yet again. So, if you've checked out the video from earlier today, I'm not going to be talking about Perdition's Mouth quite yet today. To see if that sticks around in the collection. I do want to, it's one that I want to spend some more time with. Oh. Not a big fan of the orange. Have you just had it straight, or have you been mixing it, Nosferatu? Because just straight, I agree, it's not great. So, let's see. Where to start on this massive pile of games? Yeah, when I had it straight, the Jameson, it was not great. It's like drinkable, but not amazing. Not something that I would want to sip. Alright, so, well, I have no idea how I'm going to sort these out, but let's just get started, dive into it. So this one is a newer game to me. So Clover. This is by the same company that put out Just One. And this game has you basically coming up with, I always do it the wrong way, coming up with a word to match or tie two different words together on these little things where there are 4 different words. And then everybody else works cooperatively together to try and place yours in the right spot. This one is really fun. If you're looking for a new party game, this one works really well because there's a little bit of that quiet period where you're all looking at it going like, okay, what word works for this? And that's maybe like at most 5 minutes of time. If it's going longer than that, you just have to pick something. Really, it shouldn't take that long. And then you add in a 5th card, so something that nobody else knows what it is, not even you, and everybody else tries to get it sorted out. And that is where that party game aspect really comes in, where everybody's talking, trying to figure out what is going on. A lot of fun. Highly recommend it. Let's do 2 more that are not leaving the collection for sure right now. This first one here is Orchard. This is an 9-card solitaire game, as it says. It actually comes with 18 cards, but that just means you don't have to shuffle up and deal again from the same 9 cards. You can use that other group of 9. And this is a very fun game where you're overlapping cards, basically trying to grow as much fruit as possible, and you just see how high a score you can get. So yeah, this one I have played 140 times, something like that. It's a ridiculously high number since August last year, and it's definitely going to be staying. Plus, it's a nice solo game that's really small. You can fit in a pocket. and take anywhere to play when you have downtime. It doesn't take up that much table space. Next up, we have a new game to me from Side Room Games. So same company that did Orchard. And that's going to be Black Sonata. Black Sonata, I actually got in 2 plays of it today. This is going to be a solo game where you are trying to find out who Shakespeare's Dark Lady is. And it's a hidden movement game, a solo hidden movement game, where there's a deck of cards that kind of controls the pattern or route that the Dark Lady is moving. And there's a whole bunch of different options as to who the Dark Lady could be. So when you find a spot where the Dark Lady is, you get a clue. And that clue shows you 3 different traits that they might have. And then that starts to narrow down the possibilities until eventually now you know who it is. And this is another kind of standard solo thing where you're seeing how well you can do in the game. A lot of fun. I have the expansion for it too. I haven't played that yet. But even just the base game, I probably have another 10 plays easily before, let's see. Yeah, probably another, 8 to 10 plays before I would potentially start to repeat anything. And there are other ways to even set up the deck of cards so that the hidden movement works. And it has a really cool system for the hidden movement, which I'll talk about in the review, but I want to just talk about it now because I'm thinking about it having played it today, where it's a deck of cards that basically determine the movement, and you sort that deck based off of letters on the back of the card, putting them into alphabetical order based off of different spots, which means that the lady is always moving from one spot to another that are adjacent, never just like hopping randomly around the board, because that would make it really hard to do. And so there's a little bit of setup because of that. You have to sort the cards, but it's worth it. It's such an interesting idea and puzzle of this deduction as to where the Dark Lady is that, works very well. All right. So let's see. Let's tackle a few from over here. So here we have Narabi. Narabi is one I haven't played. I want to. I believe it plays, it says 3 to 5, so it's going to make it harder to get to the table. I picked this up cheap. This is going to go in the to get rid of side of things. Only because it's a 3 to 5 player game. If it was 2 player, I can get it to the table. 3 to 5, it's going to be a little bit harder. But basically the idea is you have cards 1 through 9 or something like that, or 0 through, I have no idea how high it goes. And you're trying to get those cards in numerical order. However, each card has a certain way that it can move. So each player has their hand of cards in front of them, and you're trying to shift them around based off of the rules that are there to get them into place. It sounds like a really fun puzzle, but 3 to 5 is just hard to get to the table. I guess I do 4 somewhat often, but it's also a situation where I don't need that as a filler game anymore for 4 players. Next up, we have one that is sticking. That is going to be Say Bye to the Villains. Say Bye to the Villains is a game where you are samurai and you have 10 days to get ready to defeat the villains. And It's a really hard game. I have yet to beat this game. If I had been tracking all my plays of this game, including the digital ones, I've probably played this 15, 20 times. So, 0 and 15, we'll call it that. But I really enjoy it because it always feels like you're close. Almost always feels like you're close. There's been a couple times where it was a little bit, we didn't get that, but most of the time it feels close. It's a lot of fun. And there's also just part of me that's like, all right, I have to beat this. Next up from Fantasy Flight, we have Age of War. This is a game that's Yahtzee-esque, where you're trying to match different patterns on these different castles and get the castles of certain groups. You can lock them in place. You can steal your neighbor's or anybody else's castle by rolling for it, but there's an additional challenge to steal it from them. It's fun. The only negative I have about this, and the game ends once all the castles have been claimed, but the only negative is that it can take a little bit long. It is die rolling, so there's going to be a fair amount of luck to this, but it plays 2 to 6. It offers a little bit more than another dice game that I have sitting out here that is also going to stay around because, people in the group really love it, and it's a good filler game. But, let's get to that. Let's get to 3 games. Let's grab a handful of games, pull them down here. Handful of games. Some of these new, some of these still in shrink. But let's talk about the one first that I had mentioned. Zombie Dice is basically a push your luck game where you're the zombie trying to get brains. And that is the question, Nas, that I am thinking about is how many of these filler games do I actually need? Though, for game night, the nice thing about these filler games is that there's stuff that my wife can teach, or stuff that a fair number of the people in the group can pull off the shelf and maybe have to ask a question or two to be able to figure it out. Zombie Dice is one that I think basically everybody in the group could pull off the shelf and play, and we do about once, maybe twice a year, because it is a good filler game. Very simple. You draw out 3 dice, you roll those, you keep your brains, you keep the shotgun blasts, and you're basically trying not to get hit by 3 shotgun blasts. So, good game, fun time. It's one that I don't know that I would necessarily keep, but yeah. Zombie Dice is a great game for if you're drunk or drinking. Well, if you're starting to drink, because you do have to keep track of how many brains you've collected. And if you have 6 players, 8 players, there's a little bit of time between turns, so you may forget if you're drinking too much. Next up, we have a new one here, Bandido. And Bandido is basically, it's a little game. I haven't played it yet, but you're trying to escape. And to do that, you're basically trying to you're trying to stop his escape. And you're basically placing out cards trying to block tunnels. And if you can block all the tunnels at some point in time, then he can't escape. It seems like a good, simple, fun one. Take up a little bit of room on the table, but this one I picked up because I wanted to try it. I wanted to play it solo. It seems like that's where the game would shine solo, because otherwise you're just splitting up the simple decision-making process in something that you're doing cooperatively. Next up from Roxley Games, we have Radlands. And this one I actually want to try and get played in the next month to see if it sticks in my collection. I love the artwork on this game. It is very 80s, looks like a lot of fun, and it's basically a base defense sort of game, but it's a two-player head-to-head dueling base defense sort of game. And two-player only games don't necessarily stick in the collection long term. What keeps this one around right now is Roxley's pedigree with, well, dice throwing. And that's what got me wanting to buy this in the first place. Nice reflection off of it. New and shrink. I'm just going to stick. And this is actually one that I should have tested out today. Palm Island. Palm Island is a 17 card game, I think. Has a little wallet with it. Well, more than 17 cards here, but I think you only ever use 17 of them. Something like that. Some of it's for cooperative play, but this is a solo or 1 to 2 player game, basically where you are manipulating the cards in your hand to build up resources, to build other things, to get other resources, and you're flipping the cards around. It's a game that's meant to be played not on the table, but in the palm of your hand, hence Palm Island. So I need to see how well this works for me, because it is kind of a resource generation game, which isn't that high on my list of games to try. But it was cheap when I picked it up. I actually picked it up last fall at the board game sale sort of thing, which is why I'm going through all these games now. And yeah, I haven't played it yet, which probably means it should go. It's a solo game. If I was really that interested, I would have pulled it off the shelf and played it. But it's going to be one of those where I just need to pull it off the shelf and play it, see if it is for me, and make a decision quick. Next up, one that I don't make any decisions on. This is my wife's game. And, I mean, who wouldn't want to play Boy Band Builder? Now, we haven't yet, and I actually do want to play Boy Band Builder because it looks funny. This is going to be a bit of that sort of take that type of game where you're trying to put together your boy band, get your events, shows lined up. It's like your mall tour, stuff like that. All while then putting down other cards that give you more things, like an intergalactic stomp or rehab, important things like that. And my hope is that this is going to be a game that we can get some good laughs out of, and I suspect it's going to be. And like I said, my wife decided to back it on Kickstarter to play with her friends. And I do want to play it too. So, need to find a time to play it. Need to find a time to learn the rules. That is Boy Band Builder. Because that's what we want to do with our time. Build boy bands. Next up, we have Vault Wars. This is from Floodgate Games, same company that puts out Sagrada. However, Vault Wars is basically storage wars in a fantasy type setting. So you're bidding to get a vault that is going to be worth some amount at the end of the game. Person with the most money at the end of the game is going to be a winner. So it seems fun. It seems like a game where there's not going to be that much take that in terms of no card that's like, oh, your bid is canceled, stuff like that. But it's going to be in your face with the bidding to see who gets what. And part of this giant stack of stuff is going to show off my love for dexterity games. This one by Iton is Crash Octopus. This game, which I still need to play, paid for it already, still need to play, is basically going to be about collecting treasure onto your boat, trying to avoid the octopus tentacles, and it seems like goofy fun. And that's what I want from a dexterity-based game. So, I just need to set up a time where I can just play a whole bunch of dumb games, learn the rules, play some of these smaller ones, and see if they are for me. Because there's a bunch of fun ones there. Now let's grab a stack of party games next here. One for sure that is not leaving my collection. Yep, flick a penguin, avoid an octopus. We'll be talking about flicking penguins later. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be up there with Ice Cool for me. We'll have to see once I play it. But I also like having a little bit of a variety of games. So, Sushi Go Party. This is going to be a drafting game about making your perfect sushi meal. Sushi Go Party allows you to create different combinations of things versus what Sushi Go has, which is just kind of a set number of things. There are even some expansions, like little bits of cards that you can add to this game, which I have. And this one is another one that gets played regularly. It's great because you can play up to 8 people, so it's a good, fast-ish game. It's not too fast, but it's not slow, and everybody's engaged the whole time. And when you know what you're doing, I mean, it says 20 minutes on here. I would think that we generally play in about 30, but it's a really good drafting game with variability if you get Sushi Go Party. Tiny bit more cream soda, so let's add a tiny bit more whiskey. There's a tiny bit of whiskey left. Well, it's barely even whiskey. So next up we have an early Kickstarter game for me. Stipulations. Stipulations is going to be a game where you write out stipulations for what other people pick. So you may have chosen the superpower of being able to pass through physical objects. And everybody writes down a stipulation of, well, one of these on the back here is when yodeling as loud as possible, or only seatbelts, or your clothes fall off every time you do it. This is a fun one. This is a one that probably gets pulled out about once a year. And I was debating when I pulled it off the pile whether or not I was going to keep this one. I think I'm going to, just because I like the games that allow you to be creative in what you're doing. And while this isn't necessarily going to get pulled off the shelf versus or over some other kind of party type games all the time, it's a nice one to pull out to change things up. Speaking of party games, we have another one here, and that's going to be Cross Clues. Cross Clues is a game where you have this grid on it, and you are given a clue, or given something like B3. Each of these, so B and 3, have words on them. So bear doctor, vet is the clue that they gave there. And so you give that clue, the rest of the group discusses, and you can play this timed or not. We generally don't play it timed because it's just a lot of fun. And it would make a game that's not that stressful a whole lot more stressful if we were to do it timed. A really good party game. This is one that came out, I want to say, right at the start of COVID. So you may not have seen this, but if you can get your hands on it, it's a really cool concept, really simple game. Ton of fun. Next up, we have the Royal Rumble card game. So I was talking about how I don't necessarily love Take That in games, but the idea of the Royal Rumble is that you're throwing people over the top rope, eliminating them. And this game does that, kind of. And you want to be the last person standing. So you're throwing people over the top rope, you're eliminating them, but players don't have a single wrestler who is theirs. You start out with a wrestler, and you're playing out cards to like target different wrestlers to try and get their health or their stamina down so it gets low enough or it gets to 0 and you can toss them out. Well, it seems fun. I have a group of friends who we watch wrestling fairly often. And yeah. That is true. 3 of the 5 of them have passed away. 2 of the 5 of them had passed away when this game came out. But I want to play this one with the wrestling group, see if it's fun, see if it's going to be something that's goofy fun that we can pull out and play every once in a while. Since most of them are board gamers as well. Next up, another party game. This one is basically just a board with a ton of colors on it. And as a clue giver, you give a clue to try and get people to guess your color. So, millennial pink, or, well, that's 2 words. But you could say millennial as a clue. All right, now everybody's trying to target in on what they think millennial pink is versus what you have said. And then you give a 2-word clue. And you score points, as do they, for being close. So only one person can get it right on. If you get it right on, you get 3 points. If you're within that little box, you get 2 points. If you're outside it but adjacent, you get 1 point. And the person who is giving the clues gets a point per person who is inside that little box. So it's advantageous for everyone to try and do as well as they can all the time. It is a fun game as people disagree on okay, yeah. Disagree on what different colors are. Yeah, wow. So apparently, oh man, I wish you were joking too, Nas, with somebody trying to get hues and cues pulled from Target and Amazon. If I believe that somebody would try and do that, but man alive, if that's what you have time to do with your life, I mean, I can come up with like 30 or 40 different chores that they could do around my place. And I'm glad it got no traction, but who has the time, the desire to be like, let's start a petition to get this pulled? Probably somebody who bought the game for a family member who's colorblind, not thinking about it, and then it went poorly and they felt stupid because they bought a gift that clearly was not colorblind friendly for somebody who was colorblind. I mean, that's the sort of thing I would put money on, is that somebody was doing this to stop themselves from feeling embarrassed. All right, next stack. I said there were a lot of them. There are. This is a lot of games that I've talked about already, and I still have a massive, massive, massive stack of games on the table here. They may not all get gotten to today, but we're going to start out with No Thanks. No Thanks is a bidding game, except it's not really a bidding game. It's a game about saying no thanks to a certain number. So you have your cards that go from 3 to 35, and you are trying to have the lowest score possible. You have tokens that allow you to say no thanks to a card. But tokens at the end of the game, they're worth -1 points. And there's a limited supply of tokens. So do you decide to, well, take a higher number that has a bunch of tokens? And how many tokens is that right number for you to be willing to take it? I've had a blast both times I've played this game. Highly recommend it. Because every time you play, you set a different economy or develop an economy as the game goes on as to when people are willing to take a card. And if you run out of tokens, you don't have the chance to say no thanks. Next up, we have Cockroach Poker. Cockroach Poker is a game of bluffing and trying to stick your opponent so that they collect certain numbers of cards and lose the game. In this game, the person who is it looks at a card and says, oh, this is a fly, this is a whatever bug, and passes it to a person, the next person. That person has a choice. They can either look at the card and then say what it is and pass it to the next person, or they can say, no, you're lying, and flip the card. if that person is lying, well, now they get stuck with that card. If they're telling the truth, the person who called their bluff now is stuck with that card. So if I say it's a fly, Nas then looks at it and says, nope, it's a cockroach. One of the two of us was lying, so that third person now is going to be trying to decide, do they think Nas was lying? Do they think that I was lying? And deciding if it's worth flipping. And it could be that both of us were lying, because both of us are lying. Now they look at it and they actually say the truthful thing. The next person's like, well, that's the third different thing that somebody said it was. That's clearly a lie. Probably the first one was true. You're trying to make me think that you're telling the truth. And eventually somebody flips it, causing either them to gain a card or somebody else. Another small game here is Six Nimmt. Six Nimmt is a game where you're trying to score as few points as possible. And to do that, you're basically trying to avoid taking cards. However, there are certain rules as to how you can play out cards that cause you then to have to take them. So you always have to play a higher number than that's out there. And there are 4 different columns of cards. If you play the 6th card, you take the previous 5. But I can't play, like, it goes up to 104. So I can't play 104 after a 15 or something like that, because it has to be, I have to play it on the column that has the smallest difference between the number I want to play, or the row, for the number that I want to play, and the highest numbered card in that row. So it's a real good puzzle of a game, and you try and set it up so that your opponent has to take those points. It's one that I haven't played, really want to. I think it's going to be a fun, simple game, but it's a little bit, I don't know, it doesn't feel intuitive to teach like some games do. So I've been a little bit hesitant to teach it to that point. Another party game now, Medium. Medium is a great game, going to be staying in my collection. This one, players play out cards that have different words on them. So one word might be airport, one word might be owl. Then both players come up with a word that connects those two, and on the count of 3, they both say them. If they match up, great, they both get points. If they don't, now with those new words, they have to try again. If they don't that time, they have one more chance, and each time, if you're guessing it incorrectly, or if you do get it correctly, the more guesses you take, the longer it takes, the fewer points you get. You can probably tell why I picked this game up. The In-Between. This is a 2-player game, or so I believe, because it doesn't actually say, maybe. 2-player game, 20 to 40 minutes. One that Sam Healy really liked, and it has a Stranger Things-esque theme to it, where 2 different sides, one, the normal world, one, this twisted version of the world, are fighting kind of for a majority control. through card play. It looks fun. However, this has been on my shelf for ages, and it falls into a category of a 2-player game that is hard enough to teach, and it's only 2 players. That means I don't think I'm going to be playing this anytime soon, and I need to start adding games to that pile of stuff to get rid of. One that I'm not getting rid of. So I go from getting rid of to not getting rid of. We have silver here. So this says Silver Amulet. This is one of 4 boxes of silver that I had. I don't have 4 boxes of silver anymore because silver's a game, and Silver Amulet and the other ones, Dagger, Coin, and Bullet, they are games where you can interchange stuff really easily. You're playing with sets of, or like a deck of cards that has numbers from 0 to 13 in it. And each version of silver comes with numbers 0 through 13 in it. So you figure with 4 decks or 4 sets, that gives me, well, 4 zeros, 4 13s, and I can pick and choose and make any combination I want of that. This game has kind of take that type stuff to it. Less, I'm going to stop you from doing precisely what you want to do. More, I'm going to, you can do that, but then I'm going to try and mess it up later. In this game, you are trying to score, like a lot of them, fewest points possible. And to do that, you have this village of cards in front of you. 5 cards. They start all face down. And you only know what 2 of your 5 cards are. However, you can trade in cards, the face down cards for cards that might be face up. There are ways to turn other cards face up, ways to peek at those other cards that you don't have. And it's a lot of fun. And yeah, I agree. The artwork is very kind of How to Train Your Dragons-esque to it. Or maybe even think it's Brave, is it? Another animated one. But this one's a lot of fun. I really like it at 2 players. It plays fast. So it's sticking around. Another one also sticking around. This one I picked up not that long ago, and I played it also not that long ago. Right now, this is maybe my favorite dinosaur game that I have. So I have Dinosaur Island Raw and Right, that I need to play. Same with Dino World. I've played Draftosaurus, which I like a lot, but Mesozoic is just different. So Mesozoic has you drafting cards, 11 cards, to build out your zoo. However, to build out your zoo, that's timed for like 60 seconds, where you have a 3x4 grid, and like I said, it's 11 cards. So there's one empty spot. You have 30 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever it is, for a sliding puzzle of your own in front of you, trying to get the best and most ideal scoring setup. It is a blast to play. I love it so much because it's just goofy and things just might not line up correctly for you right when the time runs out. So it's a fun one. So I was wondering about that. So Evolution ruined dinosaur games for you, Nas. I am sorry to hear that. Draftosaurus and Mesozoic are silly, fun games. Very light. Maybe would help dinosaurs for you. I'm not going to recommend Dinosaur Island Raw and Right or Welcome to Dino World because those are both roll and rights. And I know how you feel about those. All right. Next up, let's pull over some party games and two-player games. First two-player game, I'm going to start with Hanumakoji. Hanumakoji is a game, kind of a lane battler, where you're trying to win the favor of geisha by giving them gifts. But it is so much more than that. It is a puzzle of trying to deduce what your opponent has for gifts and make them make difficult decisions so that you can win favor of enough geisha or enough points worth the fame level of the geisha so that you can win the game. All this while doing 4 actions. One of them just being, all right, I'm putting a card face down. That card I'm going to use to win a favor of a geisha at the end of the round. You don't know what it is, I do. Or 2 cards face down, I'm discarding those, they're not going to be used at all. And then third one is, here's 3 cards, your opponent picks one, you get to use the other 2 to win favor. And finally, here's 4 cards, 2 groups of 2, your opponent picks one of those. And yeah, Hanumakoji is, it's just so light and thinky. There's so much depth to this game. There's so much trying to understand what your opponent probably has. So yeah, there is no way this is going to leave my collection. That is easily a top 20 game of all time for me. And this is one that I grabbed because same company, kind of similar theming. They call it a news story of geishas in Hanumakoji. No. So not for Hanumakoji, I actually didn't get the expansions. I backed the new version of Hanumakoji that has kind of a area control element to it. There were expansions for Hanumakoji as part of it, but it's basically, I think it's 7 different sets of different tiles for it. But yeah, this is much more of a area control, or not area control, but trying almost a Stratego-esque type thing. I picked it up cheap. I haven't played it. It's intriguing, but not enough for me to keep. And I like Hanumakoji, I hear great things about consistently, whereas Shadows of Kyoto, I just don't hear anything about that. So I wanted to pick it up, try and play it. Didn't have time to play it. Have so many other games I want to play, so just not going to stick. Then we have Scattergories. So Scattergories is a classic party game where you are trying to come up with different words for different categories, starting with a specific letter, while everybody else is trying to do the same thing, and you're trying not to overlap with anybody else. So it's for 2 to 6. You can play as many people as you want, really, as long as people have access to the lists. It's fun. It's one that gets played every year and a half, every 2 years. It got played a little bit more during COVID because it works really well via Zoom. You just have to have a camera pointed at the list and everybody can see it. You can have your own piece of paper. So this one's not going to go anywhere. In terms of party games, I like it. It's not always my favorite. Some categories I'm very good at. Some of them I'm not. Some, it basically comes down to what vocabulary you know. And sometimes you can get yourself in trouble by trying to be too clever anyways. So it's a good game. And for a classic party game that a lot of people know, this is one that I would recommend over almost any of them. I don't own Balderdash, which I might recommend over Scattergories, but yeah, that one's sticking around. So this is one I picked up at Gen Con 2019. I have played it, and I had a good time playing it, but it's going to be leaving the collection. And so this game, for 2 to 5 players, is basically a deduction sort of game where you're trying to figure out who everybody is as somebody who's at this masquerade ball. And you do that by, on your turn, you draw a card. You decide whether or not to give somebody the spinning wheel. So one of the characters is Rumpelstiltskin. There's a spinning wheel. You can give that to somebody. And if that is the thing they don't want, and they get 2 of them, well, now they're busted. They're out. Or maybe it's the thing that they do want, and they're trying to collect 3 of them. And if they do, well, then they win that round. But the game works well. The game's fun to play. It's just, I think my complaint about it as I think about it is the game's just a little too long. There's enough interesting things in this game as you try and deduce who people are and try and accuse them. But 3 rounds and in a 4-player game, the box says this should take 20 to 40 minutes. 3 rounds in a 4-player game, it's definitely 40 minutes or more. For deduction, it looks great, but I don't foresee myself pulling that off the shelf all that often when I want potentially a game that can handle a few more players. And that's kind of what the stack is right here, of games that can handle a few more players. So next up we have Letter Jam. Letter Jam is Hanabi, but with words. So you don't know the letters in front of you. You are trying to figure that out. Everybody else is giving clues, including you, because everybody's trying to figure out their words. And you give a clue of, okay, I can do a 5-letter word. You put down 1, 2 tokens that say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in front of different players. And now I look and I go, okay, well, I can see your word, or I can see your letter here is a T. Your letter is an H. Yours is an I. Mine is a question mark. I don't know what it is. The next one's an F. Well, thief. Okay, that's probably thief. I can't think of any other word that would make sense. Okay, so my letter's going to be E. Let me kind of lock that in. And I'm trying to figure out all my letters. Once I get all 5 of my letters figured out, or 6, however many I have, and everybody else has done the same thing, now, without looking at your letters, having them face down, you arrange them into the order to create whatever word you were given. And it's really tough. But as you play more, you start to figure out, like, okay, this is a good clue. And it works. It's an intriguing game. It's a cooperative word game, which I really like. Now, the first time I played this was at Gen Con, and same for a friend of mine who I was with. I knew something about this game going into it. I knew it was cooperative. The person who taught us the game did such a poor job, and my guess is she volunteered to help with CGE's games because it was a way to get into Gen Con. She did not want to be helping, and it really showed. And she was done with it on the first day of Gen Con. So my buddy didn't know it was cooperative until about 75% of the way through the game, which makes a huge difference. Speaking of cooperative, we have Just One. Just One I talked about vaguely, briefly, because, well, this is the same company that does So Clover. Or So Clover was the one that came out after this. Just One is a game where you are trying to get the person who's it to guess their one-word answer. However, you only have one word to write down as a clue, and if you duplicate, well, now both of those answers are crossed out. So it's like a combination of Scattergories with, I'm trying to think, there's other party games out there where it's guessing the clue, trying to get one person to guess something, trying to get a group of people to guess a word by giving out clues. It's almost a reverse taboo type of thing. Really works well, and it's a cooperative party game. I love cooperative party games because too many competitive party games, even team versus team, can be really stupid, but like the competitive ones I don't like all that well. Stuff like Apples to Apples or Cards Against Humanity, no, not a fan of those. It relies on attempts at humor that are built into the game, whereas stuff like Just One or Stipulations, which I have down there, which I'm still a little bit on the fence if I want to keep or not, those allow the players of the game to bring the entertainment to the game. Next up, we have a game that I kind of don't like. Now, I say I kind of don't like this game because I do not like Codenames. To me, Codenames is not that interesting a game. Codenames is a game where two people are it, and they're giving clues to their teams to cover up different words and trying to be the fastest to do so. And you're going back and forth. So you might give a clue like Chicken 2. Well, it's a slow game that has people thinking and a little bit of discussing, but the game is just too slow. Codenames Pictures speeds that up by giving you absurd pictures. And those absurd pictures can cover so many different things, like a kangaroo with Stegosaurus type back. It gives you the ability as a clue giver to be clever and to say, okay, let's do Dinosaur 4. You can give those clues that get the game moving faster, because Codenames and Codenames Pictures are more fun when you can play a couple of rounds of it, but Codenames takes too long because of how or what it expects the clues to be. Then, this game has been hit or miss with my group. I have the expansions for this, and I don't want to get rid of it because of that, but I suspect I may by the time I'm done with it. We're talking here about Not Alone. In Not Alone, one person is the planet that a crew and a spaceship have crashed on. Everybody else is that crew, and they're trying to get off the planet before they die. Well, kind of before they die, because you basically have an infinite amount of red shirts you can run out there. But once a certain number of, well, not infinite, I guess, but once a certain number of red shirts die, then the monster, the planet, wins. And all the red shirts can discuss what they want to do and where they want to go, how they're going to split up if they want. But the person who's playing the planet can always hear. The game just has, I think, enough going on with it that it's maybe a touch complex for a quick teach. It's one that I really love, though. A lot of fun. They say 30 to 45 minutes, probably right. Might be a touch longer. This is gonna go. It pains me. And I'm making the decision really fast because I know I can talk myself out of it because I really do like the game. And it's one that might return to the shelf if I talk to some players and see how much they like it or not. Then, another party game here. Monstrosity. One person, well, they're going to be the victim, not the victim really, but somebody who has seen a crazy monster out in the world. And they are going to give clues as to how or what the monster looks like based off of that description. Then everybody else is going to sketch out that monster as fast as possible or as within a certain time limit, and everybody votes on how good it looks. And the more I talk about this, the more this is going to go into the pile of to get rid of. I haven't actually played it. I kind of want to play it. Maybe it's one that I'll have a game night before the sale. So maybe I'll have a chance to play it before then. But it does one of kind of the cardinal sins of a party game for me. One of the things that I don't like, it has the vote on your favorite and that's the one that wins. Well, it's less of an issue now, but when I got into gaming, it was a fair amount of an issue. If games were like that, there's always the chance that somebody would vote for something that their significant other did. Or they'd vote for the person that they like better out of the two who seem to be getting the most votes, not because it's actually the best. I think now the group I play with is fairly mature, and I think it could work better, but that's still something that just rubs me the wrong way. This one looks fun. I even have an expansion in here because Deepwater Games had a really good sale on it. But it's going to go because, like I said, it's something that I don't like in games. Let me grab a couple stacks of small games here. Apologies for all the shirt that you're seeing right now. Could walk around, but I'm not going to. There's still a few more small games over there. I'll have to grab those in a second. Oof, I still have a huge stack of games. Granted, we're getting through most of the small ones, which are the ones that take a while. So, The Ravens of Thrish, Sahasrara, is a two-player game where you're trying to... Honestly, I don't remember anymore. This is a game I picked up cheap. Well, not cheap, but I picked up because it looked cool and it was a two-player game. I wanted to support the game store that I was at since We had been there for a while playing games. It was one that somebody I know said it's a really good 2-player game. It's one that's consistently getting picked up and sold. I like the artwork on the game, but it appears to be a very, very abstract-ish game, which I do have something against abstract-ish games. I like my games to have more theme, or at least something. Alright. 2 for 1. Similo. Myths. Fables. Plus, there's more in here. We have spookies and animals? Woodland animals? Something like that in there. Similo is a game where one person is it, and they're trying to get the other players to guess their mythological figure, fables figure, monster, whatever it might be, and then you're using another deck of cards to give clues that, oh, this is similar or not similar. So how is a turkey similar or not similar to Zeus? Well, that's what you have to figure out in the game, and it's a lot of fun. Good game. I'm excited to play Spookies around Thanksgiving. Next up, we have a trick-taking game for 2 players. Well, technically for 4. And, well, I have 5 of them here. Claim. Claim is going to be a trick-taking game where you play out a hand, and then you collect cards to build your second hand by what you win or lose in the first hand. And then that second hand you use for kind of a majority control thing. I have played these 2 boxes here. These are all reinforcement packs is what they're called. Just basically more things for it. I like this game, but it's going to be going away for one main reason. And that reason is that, well, it's a very fast game. It says 25 minutes. It is definitely a 25-minute game. It's not necessarily a close game. It's a 2-player only game. Well, 4-player if you have Claim and Claim 2. You can make it a 4-player game. But it's not necessarily a close game. One person can easily run away with it simply by luck of a draw. So it's a little bit weird to be getting rid of small games because, I mean, I have room on the shelf for them. They fit easily enough. But I think it's time for that one to go. Next up, one that is definitely not going, Ohanami. Ohanami, well, if you've played the classic game Racco, there's almost a little bit of a feel like that. In Ohanami, you are drafting 2 cards out of a hand, and you are putting them into a row, either higher or lower than, or column, I should say, higher or lower than the numbers in that column. You had those 3 columns, and you're trying to get as many points out of those columns as possible. What is cool about this game, one thing I really like, is that the first round you only score blue cards. Then you only score blue and green cards. Now it's blue, green, and gray for the 3rd round, plus then there's pink that scores at the end of the game, so basically 3rd round as well. And if you get blue in the first round, those blues continue to score each upcoming round. It is a really fun, kind of light game, good for families, good for, like, my parents can pick this one up and play easily. 4-player, great experience that way. 2-player, it becomes much more cutthroat because I look at your columns and go, okay, well, I really want those 2 because they're very low numbers. That would fit perfectly for me. But you don't have a spot that you can use low numbers right now. So these 2, you're more apt to take. I would like both of them as well. Maybe not as well as the other, but I'm going to then take those two first, knowing that you won't take those next two that I really want, really need. Really good game, and plays so differently at different player counts. Next up, we have, again, one that I got cheap, The Terrifying Girl Disorder. So, based off of a Japanese novel from 1935. This, like I said, this is one I picked up cheap. I like the artwork. Like, this is one thing Japan Anime does, is they have great artwork on their games, but this has been around for ages. I haven't played it. We're getting rid of it. Solo game, A Gentle Rain. A Gentle Rain is going to be a game where you are laying out a bunch of flowers in a, well, lily pads and flowers in a pond as it is raining. It is a very peaceful, relaxing game as you try and match stuff up. So these cards, where they have the corners cut out of them, when you complete that group of 4, so there's that circle there, you put down a disc, and it's just a nice, peaceful, relaxing game. Very, very hard to find, but one that I'd recommend finding, and it's a very simple solo game. Next up, trick-taking game. The Crew Deep Sea, or Mission Deep Sea. Haven't played it yet. Want to play this because people love it. I have watched it played on the Glory Hound YouTube channel. Looks like a ton of fun. I do kind of want to do my first play at 3 or 4, so there's not a dummy hand in there. But it's taking some things that the mind did that were kind of interesting for me, like with very limited communication, stuff like that. But it puts it in trick-taking. It's cooperative trick-taking where you're trying to complete various missions, very specific things, so definitely interested in that one. Next up, one that I got dirt cheap, Blank. Blank actually was on the Dice Tower list for good stocking stuffer games because you're writing on stuff. You're customizing it so that now there are different rules to the game. I picked this up, like I said, real cheap. It reminds me of, we didn't playtest this at all, Legacy, or something along those lines. Maybe a little bit of Flux in there as well. I just can't see the playing this one. I hate to say it because I don't like to buy games and then not play them and get rid of them. That's not fun. It's more fun to play games. But when you have enough games, now it's a situation where, well, I want to play the games that I really like, or the games that my group really likes. And one of them that we played recently was Skull. Skull is kind of a bluffing, well, it is a bluffing bidding game where everybody is playing down either flowers or skulls face down into their own stack of things. And eventually somebody's going to bid and say, oh, okay, I can flip over 3 without coming across a skull. I can flip over 4. Pass. 5. Okay, 6. And eventually somebody's going to have to flip over these tiles, these coasters, basically. And what's fun about it is that I might be bluffing. I might say 5 to get you to go to 6 because I know the top one of mine is a skull, and I would have to flip that over first. I'd have to flip over all of mine first. But now you think, okay, he was willing to go up to 5, probably doesn't have a skull. I'm safe to flip at least 1 from there. And now I've caught you. Next up, Hanabi. Hanabi is going to go. Hanabi is a fun game where you are fireworks makers. I believe it was a Spiel des Jahres winner or runner-up, something like that. But you can't see your own hand of cards. You're trying to play down fireworks in numerical order. It's fun. You can give good clues. There's really tricky things about giving the clues. Like I can give you a clue that, oh, this is a 2, but I have to point out every 2 you have in your hand, or every blue, every red, whatever it might be. Good little game. Just, if I'm going to play something where my cards aren't facing me, I'm going to do that with Letter Jam. Next up, we have another game that, I won't lie, probably should be leaving the collection. Sword of Fellows, Sword Art Online. It's not leaving the collection because I love Sword Art Online, not because this is a great game. And sometimes that's enough to keep a game in a collection. It's one that I can play solo too. You're basically rolling stuff to see what sort of attacks you can do. If you can use every die on attack, you can switch, which is basically in the show kind of a combo attack where you're coordinating with somebody else so the monster doesn't get a strike in there, and you're looking to really chain that together and take out the monsters. Now, rules are bad for that game. Pretty sure I played it correctly, but yeah, just not great. Next up, very shiny, Coup. Coup is a game of bluffing where you are trying to, well, you're trying to get points, if I remember correctly, but you can lie about kind of the powers and abilities that you have. However, if you get called out on those lies, you start to get limited more so in what you can do. You start to lose cards that are actual things you can do. And this one is a fun one. It's a good game, plays pretty fast. Say 2 to 6, I'd probably play it at 4 again. I picked it up, again, one of those I picked up cheap. I have played this one, not my copy. It's going to leave because I know somebody who owns it. Then we have Quiddler. Quiddler is well, if you've played something like 5 Crowns, it's basically that, but a word game. You start out with 3 cards to create a word. Next round you have 4, 5, 6. The word has to be at least 3 letters long. It's one that I'm actually a little bit surprised, I won't lie, that I've kept it this long. I've clearly played this. This is a fairly beat up box, but it's a good word game, but, well, has the inherent problem that a lot of word games do, which is, all right, I know more words than you, I will do better. That's not that fun. Fox and the Forest Duet. This is a 2-player cooperative trick-taking game. It's going to be staying in the collection where you are trying to collect leaves, or gems, I guess. Should be leaves. I don't know why it's not leaves. You're trying to collect gems, and you're moving around a board doing so. Whoever wins the trick, you look at the number of paw prints on the card, and you move it closer or further, or closer to you. And you don't want to run off the end of the board. You're trying to manipulate the tricks as you go so that, well, now you can collect what you need. All right. I would say we're coming down to the end of it here. It's going to take longer than I thought. Apologies for just brushing the mic. But we have, well, basically big games left at this point, and some of them are clumped together, so that will make it faster. First up, Tokyo Highway. This is a balancing dexterity game where you're building out the highways of Tokyo. A lot of fun. 2 to 4 player technically, but we've played with more. You just play on teams, and it works well. Same company that does Crash Octopus. Actually, creating more space. Next up, we're going to go through a few of these a little faster now. Catacombs. Catacombs is going to be a flicking game. A flicking game of, well, dungeon delving, fighting, kind of a one versus all game where one person is playing the game who is trying to, well, take out all the heroes with their monsters, and then there are heroes. Everybody else is playing a hero and using special abilities to flick things in certain ways, score points, things like that. Then, game that Nosferatu Clown had already talked about, technically two of them, Ice Cool and Ice Cool 2, 100% not leaving the collection. I'm not sure that these are in my top 10 anymore of all time, but if they aren't, they're really, really close. So, as I said, we're getting down to it. Let's slide a huge, huge stack of games over. And some of these are going to be fast. Tokyo Highway expansion. I'm keeping Tokyo Highway. The expansion stays too. The Table is Lava. I want to play this one. It is a card tossing game about, well, you toss cards trying to knock meeples off of other cards. Looks like silly fun. Haven't played it yet, but I really want to. This one I really should play, but I'm not going to. Seven Wonders Duel. So Seven Wonders for me is an okay game. I don't think the theme is that interesting. Seven Wonders Duel is a two-player version, and honestly that's some of the issue, is there's, or was, a two-player variant for Seven Wonders that was, well, garbage. Well, not garbage, but it was functional, but not functional. Yeah, that was horrible. My apologies to everybody who's watching this. This one I picked up because it looked better. It does some things that are a little bit more interesting to me. Still haven't played it, and I got it a while ago. So yeah, leaving. This one's interesting. Skull Hollow. Two-player asymmetric game. One person is playing as the Foxen, who are trying to take down a big guardian. The other players are playing as the guardian. Player is playing as the guardian from Pencil First Games. It's a lot of fun. It is a light but deep two-player game. The issue is I have a light but deep two-player game I like better. And I say this one is tough because I almost wanted to back Mall Peak, the sequel to this, but instead this one's going away because, well, if I'm going to play a two-player game that is light but deep, it's going to be Hanumakoji. Then, 2 boxes of Catapult Feud. Catapult Feud is a game where you build castles, use catapults to launch stones at the other person's castle, trying to knock down their troops. Silly, fun, good game. I have more of it coming from a Kickstarter because who doesn't want a Hydra? Next up, the only trivia game I like, Wits and Wagers. Wits and Wagers is a game where you are trying to, well, answer trivia that is all numerical based. And then once everybody has their answer written down, you sort those by their numerical order, and everybody bids on what they think the right answer is. You can bid on your own answer, great, but if you bid on your own answer and you have no idea how many goals Pele scored, you're probably wrong. you're probably wrong by quite a ways. In fact, we had this exact same thing happen in a game where my number was by far the highest. Fortunately, I was smart. I bet on myself because my number was by far the highest and I was still well short of the number, but my knowledge of soccer is much stronger than anybody else's in the group. So some people were smart and were like, all right, Petter knows his sports, let's stick with him. Other people, well, they lost out on winning some money with their bids. Tags. This was a speculative buy when I bought it because I watched it played on I want to say it was the Fall Spectacular or maybe Winter Spectacular, winter of 2020 that the Dice Tower did. And the game looks fun. This is a fast game of trying to put together answers to grab marbles, which give you points. You can do it in teams. And it might be something like clothes that start with the letter G. But it's done in 15-second rounds. So the game moves super fast. Even if you have a few teams, it flies. I have yet to play it, but it's going to stick because, well, I want to play it. Suro. Suro was in my top 100. It is no longer there. Suro is a game, well, it's the game of the path, as it says down at the bottom here. In Suro, you are building out a path where your stone is traveling along it, and you are trying to be the last one standing on the board, because if my path connects to your path and we both hit, we're both out. If my path connects to a tile that you put down, now I'm following that path until I hit an open spot, and if that open spot's at the edge of the board, well, now I'm out. The issue is I've played this a lot, and it's a good party game. Well, it's a good filler game, but it's one I have played so much. I'm going to put it on the to get rid of side. I do not promise that it will be leaving the collection, though, because it might be one that my wife saves. Next up, Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, 100% staying, because this is the only social deduction game that I really like. In it, one person is a murderer, and they have a clue. They have clues and murder weapons in front of them. They pick one of each of those in front of them, and then a forensic scientist is sending up reports. Everybody else is detectives, or maybe you're an accomplice to the murder. Maybe you're a witness to the murder, and you're trying to figure out what that weapon and clue was through these reports. Really good. It's a game that tells a story. Next up, Camel Up. And I know where I want to put it on my shelf, but I don't think I'm going to have room. Camel Up is going to be a racing game, but it's a racing game with bidding and just general wackiness because, well, the camels can run on top of each other. So if the red camel is on top of the blue camel is going to move. Now the red camel moves as well, and whoever is on the top is in first place. So you're trying to figure out who's going to be in first place, place bets, get the most money possible. Haven't played it, really want to play it. All right, we are down to 1, 2, 3 stacks, though it's going to be fairly fast. Let me grab a small stack. All of these need to be talked about separately. All of these do not. Like I said, that's going to make it a little bit faster. Some of these are grouped together. First up, grouped together. Xenoshift and Xenoshift Dreadmire plus an expansion. Got to put the expansion in the box. This is still new in shrink. I love Xenoshift Onslaught. I picked up Dreadmire, because I've heard good things about it too. Need to play it. Next up, didn't pay full price for this game. It was on a nice sale. Quadropolis. Quadropolis is a town building game where you're trying to set up things so that you can make the most points possible by placing buildings next to each other. However, well, you are placing out your different people to select, and that determines which one you're going to be taking. There's this pawn that blocks where the next person can pick. Want to try it? Haven't yet. Small box game, Parade. It's been really hard to find. Very fun game. Alice in Wonderland theme means nothing, but you're trying to get as few points as possible while playing out cards into this kind of parade. And as you play out cards, that determines which cards you have to take. Sometimes you might not be taking any if you're playing it smart. But it has a fun little twist on it where you keep 2 cards at the end of the game. Those cards are going to be used to add to your collection, so you generally want to keep lower scoring cards, but you also only score 1 point per card, not face value, if you have the most of that color. Granted, if you have 7, that might be enough to ruin it anyways. Village Green, a little game about building out a village green building competition. Fun game. I've played it solo. I want to try it multiplayer. Going to be sticking around. Kind of following on a theme, we have Arboretum. This is about building out an arboretum. You want to get your trees in a row from low number to high. However, you have to keep cards in your hands of the tree types that you want to score. Because if you don't have the highest total value of tree cards in your hand of that type of tree, you're not going to be the person to score it. Somebody else is. And blocking is a real strategy in this game. It can be very mean. Hey, more flowers. Floriferous. Floriferous is kind of a set collection game, set collection scoring sort of game. It has one really fun twist to it. You lay out your cards in a grid, and the person highest row from the previous round, the card they took, they get to go first the next round. So you have a full selection. You have to decide when it might be worth it to say, I'll take a secondarily as good card. I'll risk it on this face down card because, well, I really want first choice of that next row. I'm only going to show you one box of this. Destinies. I believe this is going to get played Saturday. I am really excited to play this. This is kind of crazy, historical, but mythological sort of things happening. Doesn't look like a complex game. From Lucky Duck Games, has an app integrated to it. Gloryhound YouTube channel, who I keep on talking about, but I watch all their stuff because they're great. They have a playthrough of it that is worth checking out at least a little bit to see how it is played, because it is scenario based, so you will potentially have spoilers if you want to play it. All right, last stack of games. It is a monster stack of games with some heavy hitters in it. Just out of view. Starting out with the heaviest of those heavy hitters. Battlestar Galactica. Let me remove that price tag from it. I don't know why I haven't yet. Obviously, used this game. I mean, somebody probably has it in shrink somewhere, but they're also not going to sell it for under $400. BSG is a... Come on. Hidden role game where some of the people are Cylons trying to sabotage the mission to, well, find a way to get away from the Cylons. And you may not know you're a Cylon because it might be halfway through the game that you become one. Very fun game, big, longer game, re-implemented as Unfathomable, still in shrink, still going to keep it because Unfathomable is a better out-of-the-box base game. Battlestar Galactica has an amazing theme, but base game isn't quite as good. Let's see, we'll set you aside. Call of Cthulhu. This is the base for a living card game, one of the first ones that Fantasy Flight did. I picked it up at what I thought was a solid price. I haven't played it. I just don't think I'm going to. So let's move on to the next one. And this one is Hexport, the Force of Adremond. Hexport is going to be a big kind of exploration, not really dungeon crawler, but kind of dungeon crawler, buying gear, upgrading characters sort of game. I want to play it. I picked it up. This is, definitely not leaving the collection anytime soon. At least not until I've played it. Alright, next one. Set a Watch. Set a Watch is, I think it's, 1 to 4 player game. Takes about 60 minutes where you're basically trying to manage your campsite as well as fight off monsters, stuff like that, and sending out different heroes to deal with those monsters, but having to keep somebody back every day. From Rock Banner Games, new in shrink. It's one that I've heard really good things about solo, so definitely going to stick around. Chronicles of Crime, as well as Welcome to Redview. Both of these will be sticking around. I love my deduction games. And Welcome to Redview takes that to a kids on bike situation, which is kind of going to be that Stranger Things, Super 8, Goonies, that sort of vibe to it. Really want to try it with both things. And finally, we have Root, as well as 2 expansions, Clockwork expansion and the Underworld expansion. And I will get the Marauders when that comes out. Even have some of these small box expansions in the boxes as well. I need to find a better way to store it. That is the big thing that I need to do right now. But Root is a great game. It's a super asymmetric game for, ideally 4 players. It says 2 to 4. With the Clockwork expansion, it says 1 to 4. It's really probably at best a 3 or 4 player game, with some now ways to play it at lower player counts. But it's cute artwork with kind of a war theme to it. A lot of fun. I haven't played my copy. I have played it. I want to play it more. I need to find a group to play it with, because Root is not a game where you sit down and casually play it with somebody new. You have to teach how every character plays that's going to be in your game, because, you need to know that in order to keep them in check so that they aren't running away and winning. Like the Irie and the Marquis de Cat almost have to be, they have to be working to keep the Woodland Alliance in check. Everybody has to be paying attention to the Vagabond, because if you don't know how or what the other people are doing, somebody is going to run away and win. But that's it for today. I think that's something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 17 games? Something like that for today. Going away. And 17 games is not that much considering how many I have sitting next to me that, well, I have to get back on the shelves before this room is going to have Tainted Grail on the table tomorrow. But thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening to me ramble for quite a while here. I hope that it was fun. Thank you to everybody who has joined in on the live stream. If you're enjoying this content, give the video a thumbs up. If you want to know when I go live, subscribe and click that notification bell. It will tell you whenever I put up a new video. But with that, it's all gone, but bottoms up.